The sinus thing. That's how I always know. Not a smell, not a sound. It's pressure. Right here, behind the bridge of my nose, like the moment before a nosebleed that never comes. You know that feeling? That fullness, that sense of something about to give, but it doesn't. It hasn't given in 60 years. I sit in this chair and I feel it right now, just talking about it. And it hasn't given since 1950. I'm 79 years old. I served in Army intelligence. I speak German. Grew up speaking it. My mother's family was from Stuttgart, which is why they put me in the debriefing program after the war. Put me in a room with men who had done things I try not to think about and asked me to translate. And I did. For 3 years I translated. For 3 years I wrote up reports and handed them to men in suits and never heard another word. But one of those men, one of the ones I spent 6 months sitting across from, described something to me, described it so precisely, with such plain confidence, that I went home every night for 6 months and stared at my ceiling. And then, in 1949, they told me I was being reassigned. Temporary duty, they said. 6 months. And I understood, finally, why they'd kept me in the program so long. I'm just a guy who was in the right room at the wrong time. Or the wrong room at the right time. I don't know which anymore. The thing I have is this, a single sheet of paper. Standard German aerial survey form, 1939. I can show you the watermark. Reichsluftfahrtministerium, the Air Ministry. There's a stamp at the top. Coordinates in the Ross dependency. Dated the 17th of January, 1939. The front is what you'd expect. Grid squares, elevation readings, a note in the margin about ice density. Standard stuff. The back is something else. Writing across the entire back surface. Small, dense, spiraling from the upper right corner inward toward the center, filling every centimeter of white space. Not German. Not any alphabet I have ever been shown. Not any language anyone I've shown it to can identify. A linguist at Georgetown told me, in 1977, that it looked like architectural notation. Measurements. Not coordinates. Not figures. Plans. Like something was drawing itself down. He didn't come to his next appointment. The linguist. I called his department. They said he'd taken a leave of absence. I stopped asking questions after that. I found the survey form in Halder's apartment in Silver Spring, Maryland, April 1951. He'd been gone for 8 days before anyone noticed. The form was sitting on his kitchen table, in the middle of nothing else, just the table, bare, and this single sheet with the margin writing. Face up, like he'd left it for someone to find. Or like something had left it. You need to hear this from the beginning. His name was Kurt Halder. Dr. Kurt Halder. He'd been a geophysicist with the Schwabenland Expedition, the German Antarctic Expedition of 1938 to 1939. And before that, he'd worked for the Geological Survey of the Reich, mostly doing subterranean mapping in the Alps. He was 42 when I first met him. Slight man. Wire glasses. He had the look of someone who had been sleeping badly for a very long time, but he was careful and precise in everything he said. And he never dramatized anything. That was what got me. He described extraordinary things in the flattest possible voice, like he'd made peace with them years ago, and was just giving you the facts. He'd surrendered to American forces in May of '45, in a small town outside Munich, and for a year nobody'd known what to do with him, because his work wasn't weapons-related, wasn't rocketry, wasn't anything the main programs wanted. Then someone at intelligence pulled his Antarctic file and decided he was worth talking to, and they assigned me to him in October of '46. The first 6 sessions were routine. His background, his training, his role on the Schwabenland. The ship had left Hamburg in December of '38, reached the Princess Martha coast in mid-January '39, and spent 3 weeks conducting aerial survey flights over a 600,000 square kilometer section of the continent. They dropped metal survey stakes from the planes to claim the territory. Iron rods with the Luftwaffe eagle stamped on them. Dropped every 30 kilometers. I knew all of this already. It was in the public record. Then the 7th session. I walked in, sat down, uncapped my pen, and Halder looked at me the way you look at someone when you've made a decision you've been putting off, and he said, in German, "I need to tell you about the 7th of February. I had my notebook. I said, "Go ahead." He took off his glasses, cleaned them on his shirt, put them back on. On the 7th of February 1939, he said, the Boreas flight, one of our 2 aircraft, detected an anomaly in the thermal imaging data approximately 340 kilometers inland of the coast. A warm zone, not geothermal, not a subglacial lake. Wrong shape, wrong temperature gradient, wrong. He paused, made a small, precise gesture with his hand. Wrong everything. The anomaly, Halder continued, presented on the aerial survey as a series of parallel lines, regular intervals, 3 meters apart, running east to west for approximately 2 kilometers, then turning. He touched the table, drew a corner in the air, 90 degrees, running north to south for approximately the same distance, and then turning again. I wrote it down. Then I looked up. A grid, I said. A grid, he said. Exactly a grid. In the thermal data, under 60 meters of ice. That was the first time I felt it. November 1946, sitting in a prefab building in Virginia, taking notes. Not dramatic, a headache that wasn't quite a headache. They went down. Of course they went down. The expedition commander, a man named Richer, had filed a report with the Air Ministry, received orders within 48 hours, and on the 11th of February, a ground party of 8 men descended by sled to the anomaly's surface location. Halder was among them. The entrance was in an ice face. That's what he called it, a vertical exposure of glacial ice where the surface had calved to reveal the body of the glacier. They'd been directed to it by the aerial coordinates, and it was just there, an opening in the ice wall roughly 4 meters wide and 2.5 meters tall, roughly rectangular but not exactly. The angles were slightly off, Halder said. Not wrong, just off. Off how? I asked. A few degrees. The corners were not quite 90 degrees, perhaps 87, 86, the kind of thing you would almost not notice. Almost, I said. Almost, he said. The first thing they noticed inside was the temperature. Not cold. The air inside was approximately 7 degrees Celsius, dramatically warmer than the -15 outside. No visible heat source. The second thing, the walls. Halder described them to me over 3 sessions, because he kept coming back to them, trying to get it right. They looked like stone. Dark gray. Very fine grain. But when you pressed your hand against them, they were not soft, he said. That's not the word, but not hard the way stone is hard. There was give, like pressing your palm into packed muscle, firm but not rigid. And warm, warmer than the air. I pressed my hand against it, he said, and held it there for 30 seconds, and I felt. He stopped, looked at his hands. I felt it push back, very slightly, like a slow pulse. I wrote that down. I didn't say anything. The others felt it too, he said. Nobody mentioned it. They went in about 200 meters that first day. The passage was straight, then turned. 90 degrees, but again slightly off. 88, 87. The angles were never quite right, and the passage continued beyond what their lights could reach. They left a mark at the entry point. One of the iron survey stakes, pounded into the ice of the opening's floor, and came back up. The second day, they went in further. 400 meters, found a junction. The passage branched into 3. They marked the junction, spent an hour mapping, came back up. On the third day, they found that the survey stake, the iron rod they'd left at the entry, marked with the Luftwaffe eagle, still standing, was not where they'd left it. It was still there, still upright, but it was no longer in the ice floor. It was in the wall, embedded in the gray material, about 8 inches back from the surface, perfectly vertical, perfectly preserved. You could see it through the wall like something seen through very dark glass. No hole where they'd pounded it, no mark. The wall smooth around it. Halder said 2 men turned around and left immediately. He said he understood the impulse. He kept going anyway. The third thing that got me was the orientation. Every passage they mapped, and they mapped 17 over 8 days, angled over its length in the same direction. Not obviously. If you measured any single passage, it appeared to run straight or to turn randomly. But if you plotted all the passages together on a map, Halder had noticed they all shared a lean, a bias, every one of them trending, fractionally, toward a point approximately 80 kilometers to the southeast. Like roads, I said. No, he said. Roads lead to something you can see. These were leading to something below. The pressure came back when he said that. I put my pen down. I won't pretend I believed all of it. Not then. But I couldn't find the lie in him. He was a trained geophysicist. He'd spent his career measuring things underground. He had no obvious reason to invent this. He just described it. Flat voice. Wire glasses. Hands folded on the table, and every session he came back and described it more. By month 5 of the debriefings, he told me about the second German expedition. He hadn't been on it. He'd refused. It had gone in 1942. Secret, run by a special division of the SS research arm. 6 men, no public record. The whole thing buried in files that hadn't been turned over. He knew about it only because one of the 2 men who came back had been a colleague, a man named Schwartz, who had found him in Berlin in late 43 and told him. They'd gone deeper, much deeper. The structure, Halder called it that now. The structure, not the passages, had grown. New passages where his 1939 maps showed nothing. New chambers, and at a depth his team had never reached. Schwartz said the walls had changed. Less gray, more translucent, and patterned. Intricate surface patterns that Schwartz had described using the word Schaltkreise. Circuitry. Schwartz had come back. He'd said almost nothing for 6 weeks. Then he described the deeper level, calmly, to Halder. Then he'd asked Halder a question. What did he ask? I said. Halder looked at the table. He asked if I'd noticed, when I was inside, that the space felt like it had been waiting for me. A week later, Schwartz was gone. Halder never heard from him again. In 1949, my commanding officer, Colonel Pierce, gray-faced, always smelling of cigarettes, called me into his office and told me I was being reassigned. They were attaching me to a scientific observation team joining the Norwegian-British-Swedish Antarctic Expedition as an intelligence liaison. My job, he said, was to verify certain geographic data. I asked what data. He put a photograph on the desk. Aerial survey, high altitude, grid lines in the ice, thermal anomaly pattern, parallel lines at 3-meter intervals, turning 90 degrees 2 kilometers in each direction. Dr. Halder described this location. Pierce said, "We need to know if his description is accurate." I asked if Halder was coming. Pierce said no. I asked if Halder knew about the expedition. Pierce said that wasn't my concern. I understood then why they'd kept me in the room with Halder for 6 months. They weren't just collecting intelligence. They were preparing someone to recognize what he'd described. We reached the Norwegian base at Maudheim in February of 1950. The cover story was Geological Survey. I was listed as a communications liaison, which wasn't far from wrong. Commander Briggs was our senior officer. Navy man, late 40s, square jaw. The kind of man who treats every problem as a logistics problem and believes firmly that logistics is everything. He wasn't cruel, and he wasn't stupid. He had organized the world into categories of manageable and not yet managed, and he intended to move everything into the first. I had seen the type before. In my experience, the type does not do well in places where the categories stop working. Dr. Annika Svensson was the Norwegian geologist assigned to the survey team. 36 years old, short red hair, always had 3 pencils in her breast pocket and a 4th behind her ear. She was the best field scientist I have ever worked with, before or since. She thought in layers, surface, substrate, deep structure, and she had a gift for reading ice that I can only describe as physical intuition. She could look at an ice face and tell you when it formed, what the pressure history was, what was underneath. She took nothing on faith. In that way, she was like Halder. Sergeant Darby was my man. He'd been assigned to me as a kind of assistant escort, and after 2 weeks in the field, he was just my friend. From Tulsa, Oklahoma. 24 years old. He had a photograph of his younger sisters tacked to the inside of his footlocker, 3 of them, all with his same brown eyes. And he sent money home every month and talked about them the way other men talked about wives. He was afraid of nothing visible and worried constantly about things you couldn't see. That sky, he'd say, looking south toward the interior. That sky looks wrong, Voss. And he'd be right. A storm would come in 2 hours. He had the best instincts of anyone on that ice. I want you to understand that about him. Warrant Officer Chen ran communications. Chinese American, from San Francisco. 2nd generation. Meticulous in a way that went beyond professional. Every transmission logged, every frequency noted, every anomaly in the signal environment flagged and filed. He had a notebook he carried everywhere, pages dense with signal data. He joked that if the transmissions ever got weird, he'd know it faster than the machines. He wasn't wrong about that either. Kowalski was Navy Polish-American, broad through the shoulders, had a wife and 2 daughters back in Bridgeport, and their photograph on his bunk, and the wedding ring he never once removed. He talked about them every evening without fail. What his wife had written last letter, what his youngest had said about school. He'd been on the ice 4 months, and he still talked about them like a man who'd left yesterday and was going home tomorrow. I think that is the only way to survive a place like that. I think Kowalski understood something most of us didn't. Private Park was Korean American. From Los Angeles, 22 years old, very quiet, very observant. He drew maps in his spare time, not official survey maps, personal ones, just the views he saw from wherever we were stationed. Very good maps. He could hold the shape of a place in his head and put it down accurately, without instruments. We found the location on the 19th of March, exactly where the 1939 survey said it would be, 340 kilometers inland. The ice face was there, the opening was there, same dimensions Halder described, same slightly off angles at the corners, and standing just inside the threshold, embedded in the left-hand wall about 8 inches back from the surface, was an iron rod approximately 60 centimeters long, visible through the gray material like something drowned in dark water. The Luftwaffe Eagle, still distinguishable on the upper section. 11 years, in the wall, not corroded, not displaced. Briggs looked at it for about 10 seconds. "Someone came in here before us," he said. "Yes, sir," I said. "Germans. In 1939. "Well," he said, "we're here now." The pressure behind my nose came back the moment I stepped inside, like a hand pressing gently on the bridge from the inside, pushing outward. I stopped, put my fingers to my face, moved on. The first day we mapped the original passage system, all 17 routes that Halder had documented in 1939. His maps were accurate. The passages were there exactly as he'd drawn them. But there were additions. 11 years later, there were more passages. 4 new junctions, 9 new branches, all following the same slightly off 90 angles, all sharing the same directional lean toward the southeast and downward. The structure was growing, not fast, not visibly while we were watching, but something had had 11 years. And used them. Svensson took samples on the second day. She worked at the wall with a geological hammer and a chisel for 40 minutes, and I watched her face go through several things as she did. The material was hard, not as hard as stone, but hard enough that the work was real work. She got a fragment about the size of a golf ball, sealed it in a sample bag, and didn't say anything until we were outside. That night, at the base camp we'd set up 400 meters from the opening, she sat with her portable microscope under a lamp for 2 hours. I was in my bunk. Darby was on watch outside. At about 11 p.m., she came and stood by my bunk until I woke up. "Voss," she said, "come look at this." I pulled on my boots and followed her to the sample table. She moved aside and I put my eye to the scope. I don't know what I expected to see. Crystal structure, mineral grain, whatever made the material feel the way it did. What I saw were cells, not crystal lattice, not mineral grain. Cells, with walls, with what looked like nuclei, arranged in a regular pattern, hexagonal, like looking at a cross-section of bone, or wood. Organic cellular structure in a material that had come out of a wall 60 meters under Antarctic ice. I looked up at Svensson. "I need to do more tests," she said. "But Voss." She put her hand flat on the table, quietly, the way you put a hand down when you want to stop something from shaking. "This material is alive. Not alive as in geologically active. The passages we've been walking through." She looked at the sample bag. She looked at me. "We are not standing inside a cave. We are standing inside a body." I went back to my bunk. I lay there with the pressure behind my nose and thought about the survey stake in the wall. I thought about Halder saying he felt the wall push back. The next morning I went to Briggs's tent and told him what Svensson had found. He was eating breakfast. He put his fork down. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then he picked his fork back up. "Dr. Svensson is a geologist," he said, "not a biologist. She's very thorough, and we are a survey team. We are here to verify geographic data. We are not here to," he made a circling gesture with his fork, "classify organisms. Get her focused on the mapping. Commander, if the material is alive." "Voss." He looked at me directly. Flat expression. "The material is rock. What Svensson is seeing is an unusual crystal formation. It's interesting. Write it up. Don't let it slow us down." I walked out of his tent. Darby was waiting outside, hands in his pockets, looking at the sky. "That sky," he said. I looked. "Blue, cloudless. Looks fine to me," I said. "Yeah," Darby said. "That's what I mean." On the 4th day, Briggs ordered a deeper penetration. We were going to follow the lean, the directional orientation Halder had mapped, as far as our equipment and lights would take us. The survey team went in, 8 strong. Me, Darby, Chen, Svensson, Briggs, Kowalski, Park, and a young private from Georgia everybody called Trace. Trace was 20 years old. He'd never been outside the continental United States before this assignment. He carried a harmonica in his breast pocket and played it badly and cheerfully, and he'd been practicing the same 3 songs for 6 months and still wasn't landing them right, and he'd tell you that with a grin and play them again. Every morning out on the ice, for a few minutes before we went in, you'd hear him working through Red River Valley, never quite getting the melody, never stopping trying. We went in 1 kilometer the first day. The passage at that depth was different from the upper levels, not wider, the same 4 meters across, but taller. The ceiling in the upper passages was maybe 3 meters. At 1 kilometer depth, it was 6. At 1.5, it was 10. As if the structure was accommodating us with more headroom the further down we went. And the walls were changing. The gray material was still there, but it was thinner in a way. More translucent. In certain spots, if you held your light close to the wall, you could see into it. Shapes behind the surface, maybe 20-30 centimeters back, visible like things behind frosted glass. I described what I saw to Darby, and he said it looked like pipes, like the inside of a wall with plumbing visible. They weren't pipes. They were the wrong shape, and they were branching. And at the junctions, the branches were different diameters, like a tree distributing water from trunk to smaller and smaller limbs. Veins. I didn't say that out loud. Chen started getting anomalous signals on the 3rd day of the deeper descent. He reported it during dinner. Flat and professional. The way he reported everything. Picking up signal traffic on 19.5 megahertz. Short burst, repeating pattern. Can't identify the source. Briggs? Another expedition? The transmission is using call signs that don't correspond to any current operation. Old format. I'd put the encoding style at late 30s maybe. 40, 41 at the latest. The pressure behind my nose moved. Deeper. Behind my eyes now, faint, like the weather was about to change. German? I said. Chen looked at me. Possibly. Play it, Briggs said. Chen had a portable receiver. He set it up in the mess tent and found the frequency. And we listened. Static. Then burst. Words. Short, 2 or 3 syllables. Then cut. Static. Then burst again. Repeating. Regular. Like a beacon. I listened for 3 full cycles before I understood what I was hearing. Wider gain, the signal said. Over and over. Wider gain. Keep going. Just that. Keep going. On a frequency that should have been dead for 11 years. From a location that had no transmitter. In the voice of a man who had been on the ice in 1939. Svensson looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us said anything. Briggs said, "Signal artifact. Atmospheric bounce. Someone's transmission from the coast." He looked at his watch. We go to our bunks. We went to our bunks. In the morning, Svensson came to Briggs with her full analysis, and I was present for it. She'd run every test she could, with her portable kit. Thermal response. The material was generating its own heat, consistent with metabolic activity. Chemical analysis. The material contained compounds associated with organic tissue. Not exactly the same, but analogous. The crystal structures she'd identified as cellular were showing behavior under heat that inorganic material doesn't show. It was responding to external stimuli. As far as her equipment could determine, it was growing. "Commander," she said, "what we are inside is not a geological formation. It is an organism of unprecedented size. The passages we've been mapping are its interior structure, possibly circulatory, possibly something we don't have a category for. We are inside a living thing significantly larger than anything in any taxonomy I know. And it is aware of us." Briggs set down his coffee cup. Aware. The passages orient toward where we are. I've been tracking it. Over 6 days, the main passage has developed a slight, measurable curve. It is turning toward us, the way a plant turns toward light. Briggs looked at me. I said, "I've seen data that supports this, sir." "From a Nazi scientist," Briggs said. From a man who was inside the same structure 11 years ago. Yes. Briggs was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We are 2 days from completing the survey. I'm not pulling a team out 2 days early because a geologist thinks the rock is moving. We go deeper today. We complete the survey. We go home." Svensson put her notebook on the table. "Commander, based on the size of the passages, the complexity of the internal structure visible through the walls, and the directional orientation of every passage we've mapped, the center of this organism is approximately 80 kilometers southeast of us. It is not the size of a cave system. It is not the size of a mountain. This structure extends under the entire ice shelf. It may extend under the entire continent. We are not in a room. We are in a capillary." Briggs stood up. He was not an unkind man. I want to be clear about that. He picked up Svensson's notebook, handed it back to her, and said, "Write that up for your report. We go deeper at 0800. I've thought about that order every day since. Not with anger anymore, just with the flat clarity of knowing what happens when a man with a rigid idea runs into something that operates outside the idea." He didn't have the context I had. He hadn't sat across from Kurt Halder for 6 months. He hadn't heard Schwartz's question, "Does it feel like the space was made for you?" We went in at 0800. All 8. Full kit. Lights, radios, sampling equipment, sidearms, and Briggs had brought 2 cases of demolition charges that he'd been non-committal about since we left Modheim. For the first 2 hours, it was normal. More of the same. Deeper passages, higher ceilings, 18 meters at 2 kilometers depth. Svensson measured silently, recorded everything. The veins behind the walls were thicker here, more visible, the cellular structure more complex, the branching finer. At one point, I put my hand on the wall and held it and felt it. Faint. Slow. The pushback, like the wall knew my hand was there. The first new thing came at approximately 2.5 kilometers. The passage ended in a chamber. The ceiling was 30 meters up. Svensson measured it. The chamber was roughly circular, 40 meters across, and the walls, floor to 30 meter ceiling, were covered in an intricate patterned surface that was not random and was not purely decorative, dense, interlocking, recursive. The same shape repeating at different scales, smaller versions inside larger ones, all the way down to the limit of the eye, like a blueprint that was also a map that was also a blueprint. I stood in the center of that chamber and looked at the walls and felt the pressure in my head become a low, steady ache, right behind my eyes. Both eyes, like my skull was one size too small for what I was looking at. "My God," Trace said, behind me. And then Chen put his hand to his earpiece. "Sir," he said quietly, "something's changed." He'd set up the portable receiver, and now the signal was stronger. Not Weitergehen this time. A voice, speaking German. I moved next to Chen and listened. The voice was very calm. Male, older, speaking in the precise flat German of a trained academic. "I want you to understand that there is no danger here." That was the first thing I understood, and it took me some time. What frightened me initially was the scale. When you understand the scale, you stop being frightened, because the scale implies something. What I am seeing now. "Who is it?" Briggs said, low and hard. I raised my hand, kept listening. "What I am seeing now is that the plans extend further than I believed. Not just below the surface. The plans include the surface. The plans include everything built on the surface. I believe they always have. I am not in discomfort. I want to be clear about that. The material is warm, and the patterns, up close, a pause, a long pause, like the voice was pausing to look at something. The patterns are very beautiful. I have been studying them for some time. I think I am beginning to understand the notation. Briggs grabbed the radio handset. Identify yourself. Who is broadcasting on this frequency? 4 seconds of static. Commander. Same calm. Same German. Your team should not be frightened. The structure does not intend harm. This is important to understand. Come down further. The passages will accommodate you. They have been accommodating you since you entered. Who is that? Is that the base camp? Is someone? Sir, I said. That voice. The German. I recognized it. I had spent 6 months listening to that voice. That's Kurt Halder. I said. The chamber was very quiet. The receiver hissed. I watched Briggs process this and watched him decide, the way you watch a machine decide, to put it in the wrong category. Atmospheric, he said. Old recording. Interference pattern. Let's. Commander. Svensson. Very steady. Dr. Halder just said your title. In English. He has not spoken English on any previous transmission. Briggs didn't respond to that. He looked at the patterned walls. He looked at the passage continuing downward on the far side of the chamber. We push to 3 kilometers, he said. Then, we assess. Darby touched my arm. I looked at him. He looked at me. He didn't say what he was thinking, but I knew. We went on. 300 meters past the first chamber, the ceiling went up again, and didn't stop. We entered a space so large our lights couldn't find the far wall. I felt it before I saw it. The pressure became a weight, a full skull pressure, like being 5 meters underwater, like the air itself was trying to get in. I grabbed the wall to steady myself, and the wall was warm, warmer than before, and it moved under my hand, not pushback. It moved. A slow, distinct motion under the surface, like something passing through. I checked behind me. The passage was there. I marked it. Then I looked for Trace. He was 20 feet to my left, standing absolutely still, his light aimed at the far wall. The far wall we'd been unable to see. I followed his light, and I saw it. The far wall of the chamber had markings on it, different from the passage patterns, much larger, not recursive, but sequential. A row of forms, each one distinct from the last, each one larger than the last, arranged in a long horizontal line extending beyond what our lights could reach. The first form on the left was almost like a blueprint elevation, a plan view of a structure. Walls, interior partitions, a suggestion of scale compared to what might be a human figure. The next form, larger structure, more complex, more internal partitions. The human figure dwarfed. And so on, left to right, each iteration larger and more complex. The human figure smaller in comparison, until in the furthest forms the lights could reach it, was not visible at all. Jesus, Darby said, right next to me. I don't have a way to describe what looking at that made me feel that isn't too small. For about 30 seconds I wasn't afraid. I was standing in front of something that had been making plans for a very long time, plans that included me specifically, that included the shape of every room I had ever stood in. For 30 seconds it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Like being shown the inside of something that has always been there but you'd only ever seen from the outside. Like the whole world turning inside out and showing you its workings. Then I heard the sound behind me, a slow, heavy pressure release, like a seal breaking. I turned. Kowalski was not where he had been standing. His light was on the floor of the passage entrance. His rifle was on the floor next to it. The floor where he had been standing was different. There, slightly different texture, a little darker. The outline of 2 boot prints in the material. Still faintly visible, like an impression in play, slowly filling, not a mark of where he'd fallen, a mark of where he'd gone through. Nobody spoke for 4 seconds. Kowalski, Briggs said, sharp. Silence. Kowalski, report. And then from the floor, not from the radio, from the floor, from directly below us, Kowalski's voice, slightly changed, slightly deeper, calm and clear as if he were standing next to us. I'm okay, sir. I'm okay. You should come down. It's not. You should come down. Briggs stepped toward the floor impression. I grabbed his arm. Don't, I said. He shook me off, but he didn't step forward. Then Chen made a sound. Not a word. I looked at him. He was standing very still, facing the far wall. His notebook was on the floor at his feet. His pencil was in his right hand, held loosely. His eyes were open and he was reading the wall. The sequential plan forms, the notation, the blueprint shapes. His lips were moving very slightly. Chen. He didn't respond. Chen. He turned and looked at me, his eyes focused. He looked at the pencil in his hand. He looked at the floor. I was just, he said, and stopped. We're going, I said. I was just reading it. I think I was beginning to understand it. We're going now, I said. Park. I'd had my back to Park. I turned to find him and he was 20 feet away, pressing both palms flat against the wall, his forehead touching it, eyes closed. The posture of a man resting, except both hands were in the wall up to the wrists, not breaking the surface. Going through it like it wasn't there. Like pressing into warm water. He looked at peace. He looked more at peace than I had seen any person look in a long time. Park, Briggs said. Very careful now. Step back. Park didn't move. Darby walked over, grabbed him by the shoulder, and pulled. Park's hands came free, slowly, like pulling something free of clay. And Park stumbled back and looked at his own hands like he'd never seen them before. And then he was just himself again, shaking slightly, looking at the handprint impressions in the wall as they filled. Out, I said. Everybody out. Commander. Sir, we need to go now. Briggs looked at the passage continuing downward past the chamber. The passage was wider than it had been when we entered. Measurably wider. Making room. Briggs, I said. He looked at the floor where Kowalski had gone through. From the floor, Kowalski's voice again, unhurried, almost gentle. It doesn't hurt, sir. I want you to know that. It asked me and I... Out, Briggs said. Pull back. Now. We went. All 6 of us still with us, moving fast. I don't know what happened in the 20 seconds I had my back to Briggs, moving Chen and Darby toward the passage. When I looked back, he was behind me, moving, with an expression on his face I had never seen. Not fear exactly. Something like the look of a man who has just understood the specific nature of his own error. Moving fast in that passage meant different things at different points. For the first kilometer it meant running. Lights bouncing on the walls, the veins visible behind the surfaces, and now the veins were... I don't want to say this. Now the veins were moving. Visibly. Rapid directional flow, toward us, from behind and below, flowing upward through the walls, like dark water going the wrong way. The material of the walls was radiating heat. I could feel it through my jacket. Chen, running beside me. Voss. Keep moving, I said. I'm getting something on the receiver. Ignore it. It's not German. It's English. He grabbed my arm and stopped. I stopped because the look on his face was not a look that would let you keep running. He held the earpiece out. I took it and held it to my ear. The voice was Darby's. Darby was right behind me. I could hear him breathing. But the voice in the receiver was also Darby, and it was saying, in Darby's exact inflection, Darby's exact tone from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tell my sisters I didn't come home because I stayed. Tell them it was the most important thing, and I chose it. Tell them I'm not lost. I took the earpiece away. I did not look at Darby. I didn't want to see his face. Keep moving, I said. At the first chamber, the material was cracking. Not structural failure, crack like a sound, like the building settling on purpose. The chamber was noticeably darker than before, and then I understood why. The patterned walls were glowing, very faint, self-generated, a deep blue-gray light emanating from the patterns themselves, and the patterns were moving. Not fast, not dramatically, but shifting, reorganizing, the recursive shapes trading positions with one another. Updating. Temperature. Above 15 degrees now. My hands were sweating inside my gloves. Trace was in front of me, and then Trace stopped. In the middle of the passage, about 50 meters from the exit, back to the surface levels. He just stopped. I ran into him. Trace, I said. Move. A section of wall where the material was lighter, more translucent. And through it, through the gray translucent surface, were hands. 2 hands, fingers spread, pressing from inside the wall toward the surface. Still, not moving, just pressing. The hands were wearing Kowalski's wedding ring. I could see the ring. Trace started to reach toward them. No, I said. Trace. No. He's still in there, Trace said. I grabbed his face in both hands, made him look at me. His eyes were wide. He was 20 years old and he'd never been outside the continental United States. We are not going to help him by being in here. We go out. We go out now. You understand me? He looked at the hands one more time. Then he nodded. We ran. At the upper-level passages, Spenson was in front. Darby was behind me. Park and Briggs behind him. Chen beside me. 6 of us. Not 8. The iron survey stake was still on the left wall as we passed it. But now, after 11 years of slow absorption, it was further in. Half of it gone into the material. The half still visible, the half with the Luftwaffe eagle, was no longer dark iron. It had taken on the same gray color as the wall, the same cellular texture. The eagle still recognizable, but the material incorporating it had been incorporating it for 11 years, was still incorporating it, a piece of 1939 being slowly read. We hit the surface. February Antarctic air at -12 degrees hit us like walking into a machine, and I have never been so grateful for cold in my life. The pressure behind my nose didn't stop. Still there, raw, but it localized. It stopped pressing outward and became just a feeling, a presence. Outside, I turned and counted. Svensson, Chen, Darby, Park, Trace, not Briggs. I looked back at the entrance. Briggs was standing just inside the threshold. He had not stepped back out, standing in the entrance, with his back to us, facing inward, very still. Briggs, I said, Commander. He didn't move. I went in 3 steps and grabbed his shoulder and turned him. His face. I've tried to find words for it for 60 years. He wasn't frightened. That's the thing. He looked resolved, but that's too elegant a word. He looked the way a man looks when he's been arguing with himself about something for a long time, and he's just stopped arguing. His eyes were open and looking at something I couldn't see. Something past me or past everything visible. And there was a quality to his expression I can only describe as answered. Like a question had been answered. Like the question he hadn't known he was asking had finally been answered. His feet were on the ice floor of the threshold, not the gray material. He hadn't stepped back in. But he wasn't coming out either. Briggs, I said, Commander Briggs, we need to go. He looked at me, looked directly at me, and for a second he was just Briggs. Square jaw, flat eyes, the man who put everything into categories. And he said quietly in a voice like a man speaking in church, "It's a plan, Voss. It's just a plan. For all of it. That's all it is." Then the ice floor of the threshold, the actual ice, not the gray material, came up around his ankles. Not fast, slow, like being accepted into something. He looked down at it. He didn't pull away. I grabbed his arm. Darby was beside me, suddenly grabbing the other, and we pulled. Both of us, and Briggs came with us, came back out onto the surface ice. The ice released him the same way the wall released Park's hands. Slowly, without resistance. Like it wasn't done. Just paused. Briggs sat down on the ice outside, sat there looking at his boots. We didn't try to make him stand up. After 2 minutes, he stood up on his own and walked to the sled. He didn't speak again for 2 days. Not taken, not absorbed. Just answered. And whatever answer he'd been given had used up all his words. We got back to Modheim in 6 days. The sleds ran, but something followed us. Not a creature, not a presence you could point at. On the second night out, at 0300, Park woke the camp screaming. He was sitting up in his sleeping bag pointing at the tent wall, screaming that there were patterns in it. We looked. There was canvas. We got him calmed down. In the morning, he was quiet and embarrassed and apologetic. That night, he screamed again. On the fourth night, Chen's radio logged 17 separate transmissions on the 19.5 megahertz frequency, all in German. All the same voice, Halder's voice, repeating variations on the same message. The plans include the surface. You are carrying it now. The notation is in you, whether you can read it or not. I asked Chen if he was logging the transmissions. Logging them? He said. Yes. You're okay? He looked at me for a moment. I keep seeing the blueprints when I close my eyes. The ones on the wall. I keep seeing them, and I keep almost understanding them, and then I wake up. Don't try to understand them, I said. I know. I'm not trying. They're just there. On the 5th day, Svensson took me outside and pointed south, far south, at the interior, where the Antarctic light was doing what it does in late summer, low and flat and gold. She didn't say anything. I looked where she was pointing. There was a shape at the horizon, at the limit of visibility. A low shape, regular, partially obscured by distance and ice glare. I couldn't have told you with confidence what it was, only that it had straight edges, and that it hadn't been there the day before. She took a photograph, showed it to me at dinner. The shape was visible but unclear. She didn't submit the photograph in her official report. I asked her why. She said, "Because I don't want to go back." We reached Modheim. We boarded for the coast. The ship left on the 2nd of April. 3 days out, in open water, Southern Ocean, gray and cold and clean. The pressure behind my nose cut off. Not gradually. It went, like a valve shut, like a switch thrown. One moment, the fullness behind the bridge of my nose, the weight of it, the deep constant ache from 6 weeks inside and 6 days out. And then nothing. Salt. Temperature acting like temperature is supposed to act. I stood at the bow of that ship and breathed for 10 minutes and didn't think about anything. Then I went below to my bunk and I lay there with my face very still. And after a while I noticed that the pressure was still there, the faintest possible residue, like the aftertaste of something, like a sound that continues after the source has stopped. I told myself it was psychosomatic, told myself I was imagining it. I have been telling myself that for 60 years. It hasn't gotten more convincing. They processed us in Oslo, and then London, and then, those of us with American billets, on a naval air transport flight to Washington. I was separated from the others at Andrews and taken to a building I'd never seen, a converted townhouse in Northwest DC, and put in a room with no windows and a folding table and 2 chairs and a cup of coffee. The man who came in was in his 40s. Gray civilian suit, no insignia, nothing on his lapel. He had a folder and he sat down across from me and put it on the table and didn't open it. "You were attached to the NBSAE, he said. Not a question. "Yes," I said, as communications liaison. "Yes." The survey team encountered difficult conditions, temperature-related. There was a structural incident in an ice cave system, geological, not catastrophic, and 2 personnel were lost in the incident. Kowalski and Park. I looked at him. "Park came home," I said. Park was hospitalized in Oslo with severe altitude sickness and psychotic symptoms following equipment malfunction. He is currently under medical care. He will be medically discharged. Kowalski was lost in the structural incident. Ice cave collapse. This is documented. He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a typed report, several pages, my name at the top, describing a survey mission that had gone routinely until its last week, when equipment malfunctions and a partial cave collapse had resulted in 1 fatality. The report was precise, thorough, completely false in every particular that mattered. He put a pen on top of the folder. "The mission produced useful geographic data," he said. "Commander Briggs is being handled separately. Your conduct was professional, and you will receive appropriate commendation. Sign at the bottom." I looked at the pen. I thought about Kowalski's hands pressing through the wall. I thought about the voice from the floor saying, "I'm okay, sir." I thought about my apartment in Alexandria, the grocery store around the corner, the spring that was happening outside without me. I signed. I'm not going to pretend I did it for any good reason. I did it because I was 29 years old and I had been cold for 6 weeks, and I wanted to go home. That's the whole truth. Halder disappeared on the 10th of April 1951, 1 year and 10 days after I signed that document. He had been in Silver Spring under loose supervision, and no one at his address had checked on him for 8 days. When a neighbor complained about his mail, they found his apartment unlocked, his belongings inside, undisturbed, his keys on the kitchen table, the survey form beside them, and the walls. The investigator's report, I obtained a copy in 1963, described unusual cracking pattern, fine lines in the plaster, shallow across every interior surface, like the plaster had dried wrong, like moisture damage, the investigator said. I sat with those descriptions for a long time. Fine lines, regular intervals, forming interlocking shapes, recursive, smaller versions of the shapes inside larger ones, across every interior surface of every room. He'd been there a year, living in those walls. The walls had been learning him, or he had been teaching them. I don't know which. I'm not sure there's a difference. Trace, the private from Georgia, was discharged in summer of '50. He went home to Savannah. I heard from him once, in 1954. A short letter. He said he'd gotten a job in construction. He said he'd had to quit because he kept seeing things in the blueprints. He said the shapes were wrong, and he couldn't explain wrong, but he knew it when he saw it. He said he was doing okay otherwise. He never wrote again. I found out in 1987, through his sister, that he'd walked out of his house in 1961 and wasn't found for 6 days. He was found in the basement of the building under construction downtown, sitting in the corner, calm, looking at the exposed framing. He was hospitalized for 3 months. His sister said he was never quite the same afterward. He died in 1993. She told me the last thing he said to her was that he hoped they'd figured out the plans by now. Svensson went back to Norway. I lost touch with her in the early '50s. In 1968, A colleague of hers told me she'd taken an extended leave of absence and gone to work for a private geological survey firm in Oslo. The colleague said she seemed well but had difficulty being indoors, that she preferred to work outside whenever possible, even in winter, that she had said, once, that she no longer trusted enclosed spaces, that they felt occupied. Chen was in San Francisco through the 50s and 60s. I called him every 2 or 3 years. He was okay, functioning, working, had a family. But on our last call, in 1971, he said something I have never been able to put down. He said, "Voss, do you ever walk into a building and feel like it was already expecting you?" I said yes. He said, "I think I've been trying to understand what that means since 50. I think I might be close." I said he should call me when he figured it out. He said he would. He never called again. Park was institutionalized for 2 years and then released. He lived in Nevada until 1978. His file shows a man who functioned adequately, held jobs, maintained a household, and attended a weekly therapy appointment for 28 years without ever, according to the notes, discussing the specific content of his recurring nightmares. I think he knew that discussing the content would sound like something else. He died of a heart attack in 1978. His apartment walls were unmarked. I visited Briggs once, 1965. He was in a VA long-term care facility in Maryland, not an acute psychiatric unit, just a place where men went who had stopped being able to manage the ordinary business of being in the world. He was sitting in a chair in the common room, looking at the wall. He looked well-fed and clean and completely somewhere else. I sat next to him for about 20 minutes. Then I said his name. He looked at me, took about 10 seconds to find me, to locate me in whatever room he was actually occupying. Then he looked at me directly, with his eyes, and he said clearly and quietly, "It doesn't stop building, Voss. It never stops." Then he went back to the wall. I left. I didn't visit again. The survey form, let me tell you what it looks like. Standard Reichsluftfahrtministerium aerial survey form, 19 centimeters by 28. Buff-colored paper, good quality, not brittle. I've kept it well. The front is in German, typewritten, with handwritten entries in the grid squares, coordinates, elevation data, ice density notes, Halder's handwriting in 2 places. I've compared it to samples. The back is entirely the margin writing. Small, dense, starting in the upper right corner and spiraling. Not in rows, but spiraling, getting smaller toward the center, filling every centimeter of white space. Not any alphabet I've been shown, not any language anyone I've shown it to can identify. Architectural notation, the Georgetown linguist said. Measurements. Plans. Like the thing was drawing itself down. I open the fireproof box in my study once every few years to confirm the form is unchanged. Every time I open it, the pressure behind my nose becomes a specific localized ache, like a finger pressing on the bridge, from inside. Every time I seal it, the ache recedes to its baseline. Its baseline is still there. Right now, as I sit here. You know about the Antarctic Treaty, 1959. Signed in Washington. 12 nations, including the United States and the Soviet Union, who were otherwise trying to put missiles on each other's cities, agreeing not to militarize Antarctica, not to conduct nuclear tests there, to share scientific research, to resolve disputes peacefully. Everyone who discusses the treaty describes it as a remarkable diplomatic achievement, a singular example of Cold War cooperation. What nobody discusses is the timeline. 1947, Operation High Jump, American naval operation, largest expedition ever sent to Antarctica, heavy military presence. Pulled out early. Official reason? Weather. 1947 to 1950, Soviet expeditions of undisclosed scope. 1950, the Norwegian-British-Swedish expedition with American observers. And then in 1959, 9 years into the Cold War's hottest period, the Americans and Soviets and 10 other nations sat down and signed a treaty saying the entire continent was off limits for military purposes. Not cooperation, agreement. There's a difference. Cooperation implies trust. Agreement implies both parties have looked at the same thing and reached the same conclusion. The conclusion was, leave it alone. Whatever it is, whatever it's been building, however long it's been building it, leave it alone. Don't disturb it. Don't drill too deep. Don't go back. The treaty has been updated 5 times since 1959. Each update expands the definition of prohibited activities. The 1991 Protocol on Environmental Protection banned all mineral extraction for 50 years. A continent with known mineral reserves, locked away from extraction, by unanimous agreement, by nations that have agreed on almost nothing else. Because mineral extraction means drilling. Drilling means going deep. Going deep means finding what's down there. And here is the thing that made me finally say this out loud. The ice is going. You know this. You've seen the numbers. The West Antarctic ice sheet is thinning, retreating, exposing, in some areas, rock that was last exposed thousands of years ago. Geologists and satellite mappers have been finding in the last 20 years unusual formations in the exposed and near-exposed bedrock. They call them subglacial erosion patterns. They describe them as unexpected, regular features in the geological substrate. They debate their origin. A researcher, young, not knowing what she was sharing, sent me satellite images 2 years ago because I am listed in a declassified database as a former Antarctic Survey observer. She wanted historical context. The formations in her satellite image were approximately 30 meters wide. Regular intervals, 90-degree angles. Not quite 90, she noted. Probably 87, 86 degrees. Arranged in a grid, with a directional lean to the southeast. Not erosion patterns. Not geological substrate. The same grid that Halder's aerial survey found in 1939, not in the same location. Hundreds of kilometers away, but the same grid. Same angles, same lean. Not a single structure. A network. A network so large that 60 years of warming ice is only now beginning to uncover its outermost edges. And with every meter of ice that retreats, more of it comes into the light. More of it becomes accessible. More of it becomes possible to drill toward, to put a team into, to tell a commander to push to 3 kilometers and assess from there. I hear it now, the faint residue of it, the pressure behind my nose that is not left in 60 years. Louder this last year than the year before, louder than the year before that. It doesn't stop building. That's what Briggs said. I believe him. I don't think it stopped because we left. I don't think it stopped because the treaty was signed. I think we were inside something that has been at work for a very long time and had at most mild curiosity about us, the way you might have mild curiosity about an insect that wanders inside your house. You might watch it. You might accommodate it. You would certainly not stop what you were doing on its account. And when it left, you would go on building. I close my eyes sometimes in new buildings. The big ones. The ones with very high ceilings. And if the angles are slightly off, if the corners aren't quite 90 degrees, if the proportions are slightly unusual, if the space has the quality of something designed with a purpose that isn't decoration, and isn't function and isn't anything you have a word for, I feel it spike behind the bridge of my nose, behind my eyes, like the room was waiting, like the space was made for exactly the shape of me to be inside it, like the plan had always included my being here, in this room, at this moment, telling you this. I don't know what that means. I think I'm starting to.